Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode of Elevating Early Childhood. I'm Vanessa Levin, your host, and we are joined on the podcast stage, if you will, by two fabulous authors that I have the pleasure of interviewing for you today. They're the authors of this book, Black Boy, Black Boy. And in the house, we have Ali Kamanda and George Redmond. Welcome, guys.
Hello.
Thank you, Vanessa.
Thanks for having us.
Yes, I am super excited to share this book with our audience because here at Elevating Early Childhood, we're all about bringing relevant, high quality picture books to the early childhood realm, and especially when they focus on diversity, equity, and inclusion. And so this particular book, guys, tell us a little bit about maybe yourselves and maybe how this book came about, perhaps.
All right. I'm going to have George actually kick that off, but I'll introduce myself real quick. My name is Ali Kamanda, and
my name is George Redmond. And so a little bit about ourselves is Ali and I, we met at University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. Go Heels. Shortly after that, we just became brothers. We always call it brothers from another mother. But our families have grown, and so has our relationship. To the point of initially what happened was, and a little bit about myself. So I am born and raised in Asheville, North Carolina. I currently am an assistant district attorney. So I'm a prosecutor. I also am an adjunct professor teaching legal studies at South College.
And I am born and raised in Sierra Leone, West Africa, the Lion Mountains. And I currently work at my not-for-profit organization called Salon Rising. And what we do is we aim to empower people in enterprise. We've got two flagships. One is a micro-enterprise industry where we try to provide loans and grants to low-income petty traders. Our second flagship is based on building and developing a children's community for orphans. I'm happily married with two kids to a lovely wife. Her name's Julia. And my son, Sakani, who is one of the, I would say, inspirations for this book, and to my daughter, Sienna.
Wow.
So
it sounds like we have...
Sorry.
It sounds like we have two slackers in the house here. You just got to sit around eating bonbons all day.
Ollie's more of a slacker than I am.
We try.
Well, I am super thrilled that you're here because this book has just been published. It's like hot off the press, you guys. Like, woo! So I would love for you guys to tell us a little bit about what led you to write a book together, because it sounds like you're both pretty busy, I think. So what made you sit down and take the time to write this children's book, which is beautiful, by the way? Can I just say the illustrations inside, y'all, are just absolutely gorgeous. So kudos to the illustrator too. It's just phenomenal.
Yeah, big shout out to Ken Daly. He used every color in the palette in this book, and so it's something that we could only dream of being able to display the works that we had. So big shout out to him. He's made our work come to life.
Yes.
But a little bit about how this kind of came about is this was Ali and I. This was our COVID baby, right?
Okay.
COVID's initially slowed down the world, and it slowed down essentially some of the employment at that point. So I was in the courthouse, and so we were doing sort of flex type schedule. And so I was able to spend a lot more time home with my family during that time that I would have ever had. And during that time, the murder of George Floyd happened. And immediately I was on the phone with Ali. And as this thing was going viral, initially we were thinking of our sons, and we were like, what is it that Black boys are seeing? Because this was on, kids at all ages now have phones, and this was instantly on every feed. And so it made me start thinking about Rodney King and all this. And so initially when I was looking at it, the thought was what we want them to see and what they're seeing are probably two totally different paths. And so initially when I saw it, I made a thought of before I was in the law school, I used to teach, and I used to ask kids, what is it they want to be? And all they said was baller or rapper. And so this two sort of track system, it kind of unnerved me, and it got me a little bit frustrated with the sort of projects and goals that perhaps Black youth have. And so immediately what I started thinking was, I was like, where there's this book, Ali and myself, we have two boys that are weeks apart. And so it made me start thinking about when I used to read to my son. I used to read this book called Brown Bear, What Do You See?
Yes.
And so immediately it spun from that to Black Boy, What Do You See? I see police brutality, right? And it started going very dark, very quick. I see racial inequality, institutional slavery. I mean, the list can go on. And so it made me start thinking. And luckily, Ali was like, wait a minute, wait, what are we trying to do here? What are we trying to write? And so, we've got boys. And so we need to put a spin of hope and a spin of inspiration so that perhaps what we can show them is what we want them to see, not perhaps what they're seeing realistically. So that kind of led us down this path of getting to the point of putting together a manuscript that highlights some historical figures that aren't usually highlighted. And so I'll let a little bit, before I go through the whole script, I'll let Ali kind of chime in, because this is kind of where his sort of collaboration helped join this project to the point where we are right now.
This, Vanessa, is our favorite part that we get to talk about, because for us, again, the inspiration came from our sons, but in life, we sometimes deal with beautiful things being born out of great tragedy, And at the time of Mr. Floyd's murder, it was a time for the two of us as fathers to really have to take a different look at life, maybe more different and more intentional than we ever have before, It was no longer a catchphrase. It was not a slogan of "I can't breathe," because during the conversation when this book came up, we were actually experiencing that as we talked about it. We really felt like we were being choked. And so to look at the world through our son's eyes was an opportunity for us to, I would say, add and to contribute, to what's already existing, but what's out there in terms of creating a narrative that's of hope and of inspiration. And so once George had brought this idea up, and he said, because we were saying, man, what is it that these kids are seeing? I can't believe this. Can you imagine if you go out, and this is the sort of world that you are going to anticipate and expect? That's, it's frightening. And so he said, hey, we should write this book. I have this idea. We should write a book called Black Boy. I've been writing this. I said, okay. So as he stated, he started to talk about it, and it literally was just dark, So instead of us writing a horror story or a horror book, I figured if this is for kids, because that was the intention, my input was really to turn it towards something more hopeful and inspiring. And so it became a love letter to our sons and ultimately to Black boys everywhere. And the idea or the inspiration behind, or the intention, I would say, is to create something that gives them a sense of identity that's rooted in Black history, because we want our sons and ultimately Black boys everywhere to know their worth and to really just believe in what's possible for them. But as we've said, you have to sort of know where you're coming from to know where you're going. And so, we mulled all this around, and thankfully, after many different drafts, and Black Boy was born.
Well, it seems to me that you lightened the mood, right?
Yes.
Yes. Otherwise, we would have had a Stephen King novel if it weren't for you. But what I really like about this, and this is to our viewers and our listeners as well. One thing I hear from teachers and sometimes even parents that can be a little off-putting is they might say something like, or maybe have this feeling that, well, I don't have any kids of color in my classroom, so I don't need to read those books. And based on everything that I've experienced in the world and the many different people that I've interviewed, the exact opposite is actually true. What do you guys think about that?
George, I would love you to, because since I take up too much time, please, the floor is yours.
Right. Books provide empathy. I mean, that is what it is. It allows you to look into a realm of an individual or a storytelling purpose of being able to break down barriers. And so initially this was kind of dreamt about because Ali and I, when we were growing up, we just didn't see much of literature that you would see ourselves in. And so it was really important because when you're trying to focus on and promote reading, you want to do it in a sort of ability where kids are confident with their reading and they're interested in what they're reading. And a lot of that goes to them seeing themselves in this book, right? And so although it's written to Black boys, it's written for all boys. And so I believe it brings more of a humanity element to it by having a sort of different protagonist or different individual in there.
Right. And it's so true that picture books can provide, and this is something that we've talked about here at Elevating Early Childhood before, picture books can provide a window, right? Or a mirror. Yes. So for some children, it'll be a mirror, like, oh, I see myself in that book. And for other children, it can be a window to look into something that they may not have ever thought about or perspective they may not have had.
It's emblazoned on the cover, right? It says Black boy, Black boy. And as just stated, there are those who might turn away from it. But it is, in our opinion, a perfect opportunity to be both the mirror and the window. And as George was saying, yes, this is definitely written to Black boys, but for all boys. And we will go even further for all readers, because it's also, especially young readers, it's like a fun introduction into Black history. But for us, I think, especially given the times we find ourselves in, with the world itself becoming more and more polarized, right? It's that it does provide opportunity for someone who is not Black to see through this window, as we would say, through a picture book, because it's a love story, and be able to see the humanity in Blackness. I think that allows you to, not just about the empathy or the compassion, but when you see yourself in someone else's shoes, there's a lot less for you to hate, there's just a lot more for you to love. And I think it's about that way of bringing about a wholesomeness of, I would say, of unity, and just more love that we would like to put into the world, So based off the images and the story itself, it's a hopeful one. If kids and families can see that part, which is our real hope, then the book to us is going to have done, it'll do its job. We definitely know Black kids should see that and understand that. But when kids of other races can sort of, I would say, see that as a window, oh man, that's a blessing.
Right. I particularly like, for example, for some of our viewers, if you're listening, you might want to hop over to the YouTube channel, because we're showing some interior pictures there, if it's okay with you two.
Don't give away too much, Vanessa. We want them to buy the book.
In this picture here, we're seeing a Black inventor, and I think that's something that's been talked about a lot, at least from my viewpoint. We see what we see in social media and other places. We see what we like, and I obviously am a big proponent of diversity, equity, and inclusion. But so I have noticed that I didn't know. Right. And we can't be ashamed of what we didn't know. If we know when we know better, we do better. But I didn't know about all of these fabulous Black inventors. And so in the book, there's one. And so kids are always seeing, the usual, the Einstein and the, all the others that everybody knows about. But there are some really big Black inventors that I was not aware of. So that's in the book. There's all kinds of the first Black Navy SEAL. I mean, all things like that. I just find it so fascinating. There's even artists in here. And so, as well as musicians, right? There's a dancer, and of course, everyone would expect this, and he is in here, President Obama. But I really like the way that it's a very simple message. And it's one that I think all of our viewers can relate to, because it's our early childhood favorite book. If you had to name one book to represent the early childhood field, I think Brown Bear would be one of them. So the content is easily digestible, for our little people. And I think that's one of the things that it endears to me as well. And of course, President Obama is on the cover as well. What do you hope that families, children, and educators can gain from this book if they were to choose to read it? What would they be, gaining? I think you talked a little bit about the window and so forth. But is there anything else that they need to know, or anything maybe they can do at home or in the classroom to help young Black boys thrive?
Yeah, Vanessa, this is a history lesson. I mean, it was for Ali and myself. I mean, and we're grown adults trying to understand the significance of some of these historical figures. And so we've only brushed the surface with the individuals we have in this book. Each individual we have, there's probably 10 to 20 other individuals that probably fit that same mode that you can probably do a sort of history lesson to understand the importance of African-American and African history. And
Right.
really, and so I think the thought is that this is just wanting to inspire and educate. The best thing that I hear when people read this is, I didn't know about this person, right? And so that's what books are about, especially, right, non-fictional books, is they're meant to teach. And so that's what we're wanting to do, is to unveil these sort of hidden figures that are important in our history, and hopefully educate not only readers but parents as well, as this book gets in the hands of kids.
And to jump in on that too is real quick. It also to expand what you would say the meaning of success, in the Black community as well. That it's not just, as we were saying, on a 2-track system. So as you can see, we were very intentional about some of these figures that we decided to put in the book. We also wanted to speak on what we would say is the stereotype of, you would say, Black masculinity, or even just masculinity in general. Arthur Mitchell was intentional, and so there are so many different facets that I think of what we try to bring to the table. And the hope is that teachers and educators can see that, as you just did when you look into it, so that it becomes a history lesson, but it's also so much more. And ultimately, at the end of that, it's just a story we want kids to enjoy, between a father and a son, and hopefully just inspire them to believe in their capacity to do great things in life, no matter what your skin color is, So
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes. And I love it. Well, because it's very easily digestible for our little people. I've said that before, but you don't know this about me, but have you ever seen one of those free little libraries that people put in front of their houses? You ever seen one of those?
Have one in our neighborhood. Yes.
Yes.
Well, I have one here, and my goal with my little library is to fill it with diverse picture books. And so this book that you all have so generously sent me, or your publisher has, is going to go into my little free library. So I'm super excited to bring more diversity to my community here. And I think that your book would look really great in my little library, in the little window. It's all dedicated to children's books. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Vanessa.
Yes, absolutely. And I've ordered a copy for myself as well, because I don't just want to give it away, because it really is breathtaking.
You hurt our feelings, Vanessa, if you didn't get a copy too. Oh, boy, would have been hurt.
I tell you what, and I'm wondering, here's another question for you before we go. And I'm wondering if, George, if your work in the court system has ever led you to see or notice what we call in education the school to prison pipeline. Have you ever had that kind of experience? And I really think that your book kind of fits into that realm of changing that. What are your thoughts on that?
So I'm a juvenile prosecutor, and that's exactly the school to pipeline to prison is what I see on a daily basis. either with truancy matters or with disciplinary measures. And it becomes one of those things where if kids, certain kids make the wrong decisions, their path changes drastically. And so the thought of this book is that we wanted to make sure that these, hopefully these Black boys who read this, or really any boys, understand that they are more than just one thing. They're more than an athlete or wanting to be an athlete. You can be multiple things. And I always call it like, what do you want to be? What's your plan B, right? Because not always things don't always work out as a plan A. So our hope is that they can fulfill their mind, heart, and soul and educate from within, as opposed to just relying on their natural abilities. But initially, the school to pipeline to prison is a problem with reading, right? I mean, it's a problem with education. And so these kids act out. And so sometimes you have a patient teacher who's okay and be able to nurture that and redirect that. And sometimes you don't. And that's what this book is supposed to start with. That's why it's a picture book. It's because we felt like when readers are confident, they will continue to read. Reading is so fundamental in our society. Reading goes into math and into science and to instructions that you have to put together things and directions with law and everything else. And so if you can't read, you can't function. And so that's what happens in our classrooms. That's what I see a lot, especially in the Black communities. A lot of them are behind in their reading. And so therefore, when they're asked to do these tasks, they either act out in a way that's not appropriate for school, and then they get reprimanded. And so ultimately, we want to try to steer them away from those sorts of arenas. And hopefully to do that is by instilling confidence. And that's what this book's about.
Absolutely. Confidence and motivation to read, right? If you see yourself in the book, you'll be more motivated to pick it up, right?
Yeah, representation matters. It really does, especially in children's works. It really does.
It really does. I can see the forest for the trees now. The whole picture is coming together for me. Because this book really can serve so many different purposes on many different levels that, just picking it up wouldn't tell you. So that's why I really like author interviews for that reason. And I think that this is one of your must-haves for your diversity, inclusion, and equity picture books, whether that's in your classroom or at home. And I'm just thrilled to have had you here on the podcast, joining us today at Elevating Early Childhood. Any parting thoughts from you all before we let you go?
Well, for the experience for us, what we really hope, especially for you viewers, is we are also in the age of social media. We would love to see whether it's photos or reactions. We want to see what this book does in the hands of kids. So please find us on our social media at Black Boy Picture Book on Instagram. And tag us if you can. We'd want to share this with the world as we continue on this journey. But besides that, I think, George, I want you to have the last word so that, again, I don't steal the thunder.
Vanessa, this is how it always is. So I'm finally grateful to be able to be in this position to follow Ali's remarks. But a big shout out to Source Books. Big shout out to Ken Daly. Big shout out to our agent, Kevin Connor. Eliza Swift. I mean, the list can go on. I don't want it to be one of those things where I feel like I'm at the Grammys, but mainly this point is that this book is out there to inspire hope and inspire change. And we feel that can happen not only in the classrooms, but in the houses as well. And so just grateful to be here, grateful to allow for this time to actually come about where we can promote this book and to be with you, Vanessa.
Yeah. And, we'll be sharing pictures of it on Instagram as well with our audience, as well as the promos for this episode. So for all of our viewers and listeners out there, feel free to share it out with your DEI audiences as well, because or anybody who's in early childhood or has a child, because it's a really great book. And I really like the way it's written, and the illustrations are incredible. So again, big props to the illustrator Ken Daly. So yes. I just want to give a big thank you to Ali Kamanda for being here today, and George Redmond for taking time out of your very busy schedules of eating bonbons all day working in the court system and doing all these wonderful things for children around the world, Ali.
Yes.
And until next time, I'm Vanessa Levin. Onward and upward. Bye, everyone.
See ya.
If you think these videos are valuable, you have got to come check out the Teaching Trailblazers program. Teaching Trailblazers is the place for teachers like you to get the professional development resources and support you need to thrive. It's where you can learn relevant, life-changing best practices with professional development created specifically around the challenges early childhood teachers face. It's where you can get access to a complete research-based pre-K curriculum that you can use either to supplement your existing curriculum or use on its own to get 100% of your students kindergarten ready by the end of the year. And it's where you can hang out and connect over all things early childhood with other teachers just like you and me. It's my favorite place on earth, and it will change your teacher life, I guarantee it. Come join us at teachingtrailblazers.com to get more information and apply today. That's teachingtrailblazers.com. I can't wait to see you there.